What's up, everybody? Chris Pennell here. We're going with my running back tier rankings for week 10 of the fantasy football season. If you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Now let's dive right into it. Now we're going to kick it off with the S tier, and we have 4 guys to make the cut this week. Number 1, though, he's got a locked-in reserve chair in the S tier as the number 1 option every week, no matter the situation, matchup, or whatever it may be. Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. He gets 20-plus total opportunities on average every single week. 4.25 targets. That equates to a 17.5% target share, over 17 carries per game, nearly 5 yards per carry. He's a touchdown scoring machine, over a touchdown per game this year. And I think what are we at, like 16 games in a row or something like that for Christian McCaffrey. 23 3/4 implied team total for the 49ers this week on the road in Jacksonville. They do come in as 3-point favorites. Although I will tell you right now, everybody in this S tier doesn't have that great of a matchup, but they're so talented and the offenses are going to have to get them in scoring position or just put up enough points to where it doesn't matter. And they're all going to have passing game involvement, which puts them in the S tier almost every single week despite matchups. So yeah, CMC locked in the number 1 spot. Number 2 for me is Austin Ekeler of the Los Angeles Chargers. When he returned, it was 2 really poor performances in a row, but he's turned that around, getting back into the end zone and putting up some really solid back-to-back games. And I like him here once again versus the Detroit Lions, in what should be a pretty high-scoring game. 48.5 point over-under, which is the highest of the entire week. 23.5 point implied team total, and it's only a 1.5 point spread. They're playing at home. And while the Lions are not friendly to opposing running backs, allowing the second fewest points per game, with Ekeler's involvement in the passing game, hopefully he can actually catch a ball. He had Butterfingers last night versus the New York Jets. Then he should have such a super safe floor. And with this touchdown scoring upside, that makes the ceiling very high as well. Alvin Kamara comes in at number 3. Now, we have seen these snaps decreasing for Kamara recently, which I don't love to see. But we're still talking about a guy that has over 8 targets per game this season, over 7 catches, right around a 20% target share, and getting 15-plus carries per game. Now, the matchup versus Minnesota, they're a softer defense overall, but versus running backs, they have been a little bit stiff, making it the 7th fewest points per game to the position. But we have a 22-point implied team total. We're in a dome, 2.5-point favorites, and with Kamara's usage pretty much guaranteed around 20 total opportunities every game, with a large chunk of that being in the passing game, the floor is way too high and the ceiling's too high for him not to be in the S tier. Then we have Travis Etienne, who has been an absolute workhorse this season. He too is seeing 20-plus total opportunities. If you are seeing a common theme here, everybody in the S tier gets plenty of volume, and at the running back position, that matters more than anything else. You could be as talented as you want, but if you're not getting the volume, then you're just not going to be an upper echelon play. Now, some of these other guys are going to be a little bit lower in the list. Yes, they get the volume, but there's other factors that affect that. Like if you're in a really poor offense that's not going to be able to move the ball, doesn't have as much scoring equity based off implied team totals, like a Saquon Barkley, who has an 11-point implied team total this week, or Josh Jacobs, things like that. That's why they're not going to be ranked as high, despite them being very talented running backs, because a lot of it comes down to your situation. But all these guys are in pretty good situations with decent implied team totals, despite the matchups not being that great. All right, so let's move down to the A tier here. Tony Pollard is going to kick us off, and I get it. You're probably annoyed with Tony Pollard. If you drafted him this season, this is not what you've expected. This is his least efficient season we've seen so far, with him being under 4 yards per carry for the first time. We've seen him close to 5 in seasons past, but he's still getting plenty of volume. We're talking nearly 20 total opportunities per week, but this game script potential for Tony Pollard here looks really, really good. 27.5 implied team total, which is the highest of the week. They're playing at home. They're 16.5-point favorites. The New York Giants' run defense obviously has not been that great this season. They're bottom half in the league, ranking 23rd, allowing 110 rushing yards per game, over a rushing touchdown, and 24 points total. We have a 13.5% target share for Tony Pollard. So if you can give me 15-plus touches versus this Giants defense and this potential game script, I will take it all day. And I wouldn't be surprised if this starts the breakout month for Tony Pollard, because he has 3 really soft matchups in a row. So let's hope for the best here, but I'm still confident enough in Pollard to have him in the A tier. Up next for me is Breece Hall of the New York Jets. They come in as 2.5-point favorites versus the Las Vegas Raiders, and their defense versus running backs has been atrocious this season, allowing the 4th most points per game, over 115 rushing yards, 26.5 points specifically to running backs. So talking about a guy that gets the bulk of the work in this offense. His backup is absolute dust in Dalvin Cook. Michael Carter does get some passing game work, but Breece Hall is pretty much locked in for 15-20 touches with passing game involvement with his 11% target share in the season. We're also above 5 yards per carry, so he has been efficient as well, so I don't really see any reason not to like Breece Hall this week. Bijan Robinson, as ugly as it sounds, especially with what we've seen from him the past month now, I still think he belongs in the A tier this week because it's a super soft matchup versus Arizona, as they're currently allowing the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. Now, the problem is Arthur Smith is a jerk. He just does not want to give Bijan the ball, nor Kyle Pitts, and Drake London struggles as well. And these guys are 1st-round draft picks, and whatever it is, refuses to do it. I don't know if he's trolling us. I mean, whatever it is, it's annoying. And he did say today, I believe, that Bijan has been great off the ball. But like, why are you drafting Bijan Robinson for him to do great stuff off the ball? But he's been efficient with his touches this year, 5 yards per carry, and he also has a 14% target share. So he's getting targets. But man, it's just been an absolute train wreck, and we need some volume here. So if we can get 15 plus touches versus Arizona, I like it. But I am concerned. If he cannot get it done versus the Cardinals, he's going to be sliding down rankings because it's not going to get much better from here. Then we have the Detroit duo rounding out the A tier here. We have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs has been crushing in the absence of David Montgomery, 25-point game, then a 30-plus point game in prime time. It was excellent to see, and this is what we wanted out of Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, this is why you use your rookie running back that you drafted high, because these guys are young, they got fresh legs, and they're explosive. So Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely crushing. Now, the thing is, with David Montgomery back this week, I still expect him to have his similar role. Now, it might not be as prominent since Jahmyr Gibbs has established himself a bit, and we did see the coach say that Gibbs does have his own role now, and he deserved it because he's growing. He's going to be more a part of this offense, which that's fine. That's why David Montgomery's not up in the S tier for me or in the high-end A tier. He's in the back end. But he should get enough volume to make it where he's 100% viable like he has been. He's been a touchdown scoring machine. I assume he's still going to be the goal line back. Not going to get you too much in terms of targets, but if he's going to get you 15 to 18 carries, which on the season he's averaging just under 19, I imagine that might go down a little bit if they start using Jahmyr Gibbs more, but he's the bruising back, 1 and 2 down back, and I mean, this offense is so good enough, 25-point implied team total. There's going to be scoring opportunities. Not too scared of the Chargers defense, so both guys are playable. Gibbs is more exciting, David Montgomery is more boring, but both have a safe floor and a pretty high ceiling as well. Dropping down to our B tier, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. If you own Kenneth Walker, you might be a little bit iffy on starting him this week, and I realize he's been getting outsnapped by Charbonnet recently, but keep in mind that game was a blowout. It would make sense that the backup running back that sees more work in the passing game would get more snaps when they're trailing. So Kenneth Walker, I still have full confidence here, and this is a perfect game script for him to get right back on track. He's a touchdown favorite at home, a near 26-point implied team total. And the Washington Commanders defense does not scare me in the slightest. Now, they're much worse versus the pass than they are versus the run, but they're still middle of the pack versus running back. So if we're going to get Kenneth Walker on his averages on the season, which is around 15 carries, 4.2 yards per carry, and nearly a rushing touchdown per game, 66 yards, with I think upside of more. But don't abandon ship quite yet. If he does struggle in this game versus Washington, though, I would say there is some serious concerns, especially if it is a positive game script. Joe Mixon is up next, and while he's not the most exciting running back to talk about, pretty inefficient, under 4 yards per carry this season. Pretty much a perfect spot for Mixon here in a similar situation to Kenneth Walker, although we have had back-to-back pretty solid fantasy performances from Joe Mixon. 26.5-point implied team total, which is the second highest of the week, only behind Tony Pollard and the Dallas Cowboys. 6.5-point favorites at home, getting 16 carries per game on 3.5 targets, just under a 10% target share. And the Houston Texans, we know, do not have a good run defense. They haven't for years now. They're currently 20th versus running backs. Now, they're only averaging 80 yards allowed per game to the running back position, but still nearly a rushing touchdown per game and over 40 receiving yards. So Joe Mixon firmly in play as a either low-end RB1 or a high-end RB2 this week. Aaron Jones, we saw the most volume we've seen in a long time out of him. I believe it was 26 total opportunities, 6 targets on 20 carries. And we know when he gets opportunity, he usually is pretty efficient with it. On the season, kind of inefficient at 3.8 yards per carry, but if we can finally get him in a groove, I feel pretty confident in Aaron Jones going forward. Now, the Steelers matchup, it is pretty good. They're 25th versus running backs, letting over 110 rushing yards per game. So if he's going to solidify his role as everyone in this offense, I will take it on the road. Now, I'm not too excited about the Packers in this one. Only a 17.25 implied team total, but I still like the talent from Aaron Jones, especially if you're going to be a running back that can get 5+ targets in a game. That is highly valuable. Josh Jacobs has kind of gotten together the past couple of weeks, fantasy points-wise, and while we've seen the yards per carry still super low on the season, uncommonly low for Josh Jacobs, because this is the guy we've seen right around 5 yards per carry in the past. But we have crossed the 3 threshold. We were at 2.9 yards per carry a couple weeks ago. We are now at 3.2, and now we're facing the Jets' run defense that has not been that great this year. Pretty stiff versus the pass, but 27 versus running backs on the season. And Josh Jacobs gets a boatload of volume, pretty much guaranteed 20+ opportunities every single week. It's just a poor offense with a low implied team total. So the scoring equity is just not going to be as high. Up next, we have Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts, still splitting some time with Zach Moss, but once again, we have seen the snaps increase for Jonathan Taylor. So he returned in week 5 versus Tennessee. He was at 15% of the snaps, then 42%, then 50%, then 61%. Then we got all the way up to 74% versus the Carolina Panthers. and we had 18 carries on 5 targets. That's elite usage. This is one of the better backs in the NFL, and we have seen this Colts run game be really good so far this season. In the matchup versus New England, we've seen them struggle versus running backs this year. They're currently 18th versus the position, allowing 23.1 points per game. They come in as 1.5 point favorites on the road in New England, 22.5 implied team total. So Jonathan Taylor firmly in play across the board this week. Then our C tier running backs, we're going to start with Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos, and I love what I've seen the prior 2 weeks for him before the bye week in week 9. Played 53% of the snaps versus Green Bay in week 7, which was a season high for him. Then the next week versus Kansas City, 63% of the snaps, which was even more of a season high. 12 points, 18 points, but what I love is the volume. 4 targets, 15 carries. Then the last week, 27 carries and 3 targets. That's 30 total opportunities. Now, I'm not sure we should fully expect that going forward, but that's still really good volume for a running back, which is hard to find at this point, like in the tier rankings. So I'm fine with Javonte Williams. Now, it's a pretty decent matchup versus Buffalo. They actually have not been that great versus running backs this year. Currently 22nd versus the position, so he isn't played just because of the volume that we have seen. Derrick Henry's up next. He's another just big volume play. Has not been that efficient this season, but at 4.4 yards per carry, it's not as bad as it could be. I mean, it's certainly better than a lot of the guys we have talked about. So far, it's just with Derrick Henry, we've expected him to be a little bit more efficient than that in seasons past, but he's got so much load on that body at this point. It makes sense that he's going to be wearing down a little bit. And the matchup versus Tampa Bay, it's not exactly great. They're more of a pass funnel defense, allowing the 5th fewest points per game to the running back position, but just based off volume alone and touchdown scoring upside, because he's the goal line back, that's going to present fantasy value for sure. Ramondre Stevenson ripped off a long one last week, which felt like it was more yards he had all season in one run there, but it's just been a poor season for Stevenson. He's at 3.7 yards per carry now, which it was, I believe, in the 2.9 range, 3.0 before that. So he did buff his numbers up a little bit, and this is a really good matchup versus the Colts. They have a 21-point implied team total, which is higher than normal because their defense is trash. They're allowing the 5th most points per game in the running back position, 94 yards and 1.2 rushing touchdowns. So if there's ever a week to start Stevenson, this is one of the better ones to do it. Alexander Mattison rised up the rankings this week. BK Makers ended up tearing his Achilles, so he's alone back in that backfield, which means we're pretty much getting 15 plus touches. Now, I'm not super excited about this offense with the loss of Kirk Cousins, but it's still fantasy viable. Rachaad White has plenty of upside in the passing game, which does give him a really nice floor in PPR scoring leagues. But we also saw a really good game last week versus the Atlanta Falcons. They've been pretty tough overall versus running backs, so I like what I've seen out of Rachaad White, and if he's going to get those checkdowns, that's going to boost him up my rankings with that high floor. Now, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I've been pretty low on him throughout the season, but I do love this matchup versus the Green Bay Packers at home. They're currently ranking 24th versus running backs, allowing nearly 100 rushing yards per game and close to 1 rushing touchdown. And we do have the goal line work for Najee Harris, so if he can just plunge into the end zone, I will take it. He's not obviously the most efficient back in the world at 3.8 yards per carry, but he gets enough volume to make him at least somewhat viable. And then James Cook is going to round out our C tier here, and he only had 6 carries versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not a big fan of anybody in this Buffalo backfield, but this is about as good of a spot as you can get for James Cook. So if he can't get it done here, then I'm not really sure when we're going to play him. But a 27.25 implied team total, 7.5 point favorite at home versus the Denver Broncos, who are currently allowing the most points per game in the running back position at 34.7, 130 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Also 49 receiving yards and 6.5 catches. So this is about the only spot I could ever really want to play James Cook. So I would take advantage of it. And if he can't get it done here, well, then you're just never going to play him ever again, I don't think. And moving on to our D tier, we have Jaylen Warren. Now, he does offer more pass catching upside over Najee Harris. He's just not going to get quite the volume, so he's not going to be as productive for fantasy purposes week in, week out, but still seeing 7 carries per game, nearly at 5 yards per carry, which is nice. And also a 14.5% target share in the season. So that's good enough volume and a good matchup to make him viable as a deeper flex play, depending on your league. Chuba Hubbard from the Carolina Panthers draws a really good matchup this week versus Chicago Bears on Thursday night. Saw 15 carries in his last game, wasn't super efficient. Miles Sanders got some work as well, but he's definitely the RB1 in this offense, and the Chicago Bears are currently 26 versus opposing running backs. Now, they're only allowing 60 rushing yards per game, which is actually pretty good, but they're getting beat up through the air versus opposing running backs, allowing 65 receiving yards, 6 catches, and over half a receiving touchdown. Although, to be fair, Austin Eckler did a lot of that damage. So it's not the absolute best matchup in the world, even though it's going to show that they're like 26 versus running backs. So I don't have super high expectations. But if you can get me 15 plus carries out of running back at this point in the tier rankings, you're at least going to be viable. Now, it's not a good offense, and it's on Thursday night, so I'm not expecting any points to be scored, but I'm not going to complain too much. They're the Cleveland duo of Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, but these guys are pretty much going to split the work. Pierre Strong gets involved as well. So it's kind of an ugly backfield, especially in a bad matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, who are allowing the 8th fewest points in the position. Also a very low implied team total this week at 16.25. I believe it's the second lowest, actually, only behind the New York Giants, currently sitting at an 11. point implied team total, which honestly might be the lowest I've ever seen. With Tommy DeVito at quarterback, that's going to be ugly. So like both these guys are going to get work. It's an offense that can run the football and get involvement from the running backs and get production. But I'm not excited about it in this spot. Then we have the F tier here. Hopefully you're not playing anybody, but if you're in a deeper league, I get it. Brian Robinson's going to kick us off. He gets decent volume. We're talking over 12 carries per game, just not too involved in the passing game, which sucks. And they are 6-point dogs, so I really do worry about the potential game script here. So not too high on Robinson. Dameon Pierce should return from injury this week. Devin Singletary obviously was not great in his absence. Not like Dameon Pierce has been great either this year, only 3 yards per carry, but gets the volume, 15 plus opportunities. Just not a great matchup versus the Bengals, and they should be trailing this one, so it should be another pass-heavy game script for CJ Stroud in that passing attack that does have plenty of upside every single week. We have Gus Edwards, who's been Mr. Touchdown recently. I think that's 5 touchdowns the past 2 games. If he's not scoring, he's not going to be too fantasy relevant because he doesn't really catch any passes. And Lamar Jackson could always steal his work. And this is a really tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, allowing the 3rd fewest points in the running back position. If they get it on the goal line and he gets a touchdown plunge, well, I mean, that's going to make him viable. They're 6-point favorites at home, 22.5 implied team total, over 4 yards per carry this season. I mean, I don't hate him as a play, but again, you pretty much need him in the end zone. Then Spears here for the Tennessee Titans. He's not going to be the starter, but he does split the workload almost. Not volume-wise, but snap-wise, he's going to play more in the passing role, which is fine. He's seen close to 4 targets per game, 5.5 yards per carry. He's been very efficient with the work that he gets. It's just not too much as he's averaging under 5 yards per carry this season. Tougher matchup versus Tampa Bay. But if we can get a couple of checkdowns, he's fine. But I mean, hopefully we don't have to start him. But with that being said, that's all I got for today's video. So if you enjoyed, make sure you like on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. I wish you all the best of luck on your waivers tonight. And I'll see you all in the next one.